Isabella Montenegro Blackwood stands frozen in the doorway of her husband's office, 7 months pregnant and clutching a dinner surprise that will never be eaten. Through the glass walls, she watches in horror as a stunning blonde woman poses before the mirror, wearing something that makes Isabella's blood turn to ice. The Montenegro crown, her family's sacred heirloom, passed down through 15 generations of European nobility, worth $50 million, sits regally atop the stranger's head. "How do I look, my king?" The woman purrs to Alexander, Isabella's billionaire husband. "Do you think I'm worthy of being your queen?" Alexander moves behind the impostor, his hands possessive on her shoulders. "Victoria, you're everything Isabella could never be. You understand power, ambition, success." When the takeout containers crash to the floor, both lovers turn toward Isabella with expressions that will shatter her world forever. But what they don't know is that Isabella Montenegro carries the blood of warrior queens, and she's about to remind everyone what happens when you try to steal a crown from royalty. Like and subscribe for more incredible stories of royal revenge. The rain pelted against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Blackwood Tower as Isabella Montenegro Blackwood placed her manicured hand on her 7-month pregnant belly. The city of Los Angeles sprawled beneath her like a glittering kingdom. But tonight, something felt different. Something felt wrong. At 28, Isabella possessed the kind of ethereal beauty that graced magazine covers and royal portraits. Her raven black hair cascaded down her shoulders like silk, and her emerald eyes held the wisdom of old European nobility. She was not just beautiful, she was regal, carrying herself with the poise that came from centuries of Montenegro bloodline flowing through her veins. The Blackwood estate perched majestically on the Hollywood Hills, a modern castle where Isabella had spent the last 3 years as the wife of Alexander Blackwood, the most powerful financial mogul on the West Coast. Their marriage had been a fairy tale, or so she had believed. The Harvard MBA graduate had sacrificed her own promising career in international finance to support Alexander's empire, managing charitable foundations and hosting galas that raised millions for worthy causes. Tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight, Isabella had planned to surprise her husband with his favorite meal, lobster thermidor from Nobu, delivered personally to his penthouse office. She wanted to discuss baby names, nursery designs, and their future as a family. Little Adrian, their unborn son, had been particularly active today, as if sensing his mother's excitement. The elevator climbed silently to the 50th floor of Blackwood Tower. Isabella's Louboutin heels clicked against the marble as she approached Alexander's private office, the takeout bag from Nobu warming her hands. She could hear voices through the door, Alexander's deep baritone and another voice, distinctly feminine and unfamiliar. "You look absolutely breathtaking in that crown. Darling," Alexander's voice carried through the mahogany door. "You were born to be a queen." Isabella's blood turned to ice. The crown, the Montenegro crown, her family's most sacred heirloom, passed down through 15 generations of European nobility, a masterpiece of craftsmanship featuring 500 diamonds, sapphires, and emeralds, worth over $50 million, but priceless in sentimental value. It had been her grandmother's dying wish that Isabella wear it on her wedding day and pass it to her firstborn son. With trembling hands, Isabella turned the door handle. What she saw would haunt her forever. There, standing before the massive mirror in Alexander's office, was a woman Isabella had never seen before. She was stunning, platinum blonde with curves that defied gravity, wearing a scarlet-red dress that hugged every inch of her body. But it wasn't the dress that made Isabella's world collapse. It was the Montenegro crown sitting regally atop the stranger's head. The woman, who couldn't be older than 25, was admiring herself in the mirror while Alexander sat in his leather chair, watching her with an expression Isabella had never seen him wear. Pure, unadulterated desire. "How do I look, my king?" the woman purred, striking a pose that belonged in a men's magazine. "Do you think I'm worthy of being your queen?" Alexander stood and walked behind her, placing his hands on her shoulders. "Victoria, you're everything Isabella could never be. You understand power, ambition, success. You're the woman who belongs beside a man like me. Isabella's world shattered like crystal hitting concrete. The takeout bag slipped from her numb fingers, the containers hitting the floor with a crash that echoed through the office like gunshots. Both Alexander and the woman Victoria turned toward the sound. For a moment, time stood still. Isabella stood framed in the doorway, one hand instinctively protecting her unborn child, the other gripping the doorframe for support as her legs threatened to give way. "Isabella," Alexander said, his voice devoid of surprise or guilt, "what are you doing here?" The casualness of his tone was like a dagger to her heart. No shame, no embarrassment, no attempt to explain, just cold indifference. "What am I doing here?" Isabella's voice came out as a whisper, then grew stronger. "This is my husband's office. The real question is, what is she doing wearing my crown?" Victoria slowly removed the Montenegro crown, handling it with the casual disregard one might show a costume jewelry piece. She set it on Alexander's desk with a soft clink, then turned to face Isabella with a smile that was pure poison. "Oh, this old thing?" Victoria's voice was honey-sweet with an underlying edge of steel. "Alexander was just showing me some of the family antiques. He said I looked better in it than anyone ever had." Isabella felt the baby kick, as if little Adrian was responding to her distress. She moved into the office, her eyes locked on the crown, her grandmother's crown, her heritage, her legacy. "That crown has been in my family for 300 years, Isabella said, her voice gaining strength. "It's not some trinket to be tried on by random women." Alexander stepped between them, and for a moment, Isabella hoped he would defend her, apologize, explain that this was all some terrible misunderstanding. Instead, he looked at her with eyes that had grown cold and distant. "Isabella, you're being dramatic. Victoria is my new strategic advisor. She was simply admiring some of our collections." "Strategic advisor," Isabella laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Is that what we're calling mistresses now?" Victoria gasped in mock offense. "Isabella, I think pregnancy hormones are making you paranoid. Alexander and I have a purely professional relationship." But Isabella wasn't looking at Victoria. She was studying her husband's face, searching for any trace of the man she had fallen in love with. The man who had once written her love letters and promised they would conquer the world together. That man was gone. In his place stood a stranger with Alexander's face, wearing Alexander's custom Tom Ford suit, but with eyes that held no warmth for her whatsoever. "Professional relationship," Isabella repeated slowly. "I see. And does this professional relationship typically involve trying on my family heirlooms after hours?" Alexander's jaw tightened. "Isabella, I think you should go home. Rest. You're obviously overwrought." "Oh, overwrought!" Isabella's voice rose, and she felt the first spark of anger burning through her heartbreak. "My husband is alone in his office with another woman who's wearing my crown, and I'm overwrought." Victoria moved closer to Alexander, placing a possessive hand on his arm. "Perhaps it would be better if Isabella understood the situation clearly," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Alexander, don't you think it's time to tell her?" Isabella's blood turned to ice. "Tell me what?" Alexander looked uncomfortable for the first time since she'd entered the room. He loosened his tie, a gesture Isabella recognized from their early dating days, when he was nervous about something. "Isabella, our marriage. It served its purpose. The Montenegro financial connections helped establish Blackwood Empire in European markets. But I've outgrown the need for those connections." Each word hit Isabella like a physical blow. She gripped the edge of his desk, her knuckles white with the effort of staying upright. "Served its purpose," she whispered. "Alexander, I'm pregnant with your child. We're about to become a family." "That was an accident," Alexander said with brutal honesty. "I never wanted children. You know that." Victoria smiled triumphantly. "What Alexander is trying to say is that he needs a partner who understands his vision for the future. Someone young, ambitious, without the burden of old-world traditions and expectations." Isabella stared at them both, her mind struggling to process the magnitude of their betrayal. This wasn't just infidelity. This was the systematic destruction of everything she had believed about her life, her marriage, her future. How long? She asked quietly. What? Alexander responded. How long have you been seeing her? How long have you been planning to replace me? Victoria and Alexander exchanged a look that told Isabella everything she needed to know. This wasn't a recent development. This was a calculated, long-term strategy. 6 months, Victoria answered with obvious satisfaction. We met at the Global Finance Summit in Monaco. Alexander realized immediately that I was what he needed. 6 months. Isabella's mind reeled. 6 months of lies, of fake smiles, of Alexander coming home late claiming business meetings. 6 months of her planning their future while he planned her disposal. And the crown? Isabella asked, her voice barely audible. A symbol, Victoria said, moving to stand beside Alexander, like they were already a couple posing for engagement photos. Alexander wanted to see how I looked wearing the crown of the woman who would rule beside him. Isabella felt something break inside her chest, not her heart, that was already shattered. Something deeper, something fundamental to who she was. But then, as she watched Victoria's triumphant smile and Alexander's indifferent expression, another feeling began to bloom in her chest. Not heartbreak, not despair. Rage. Pure, crystalline rage that burned like white fire through her veins. Isabella Montenegro didn't just carry the blood of European nobility. She carried the blood of warriors, of queens who had fought off invasions and protected their kingdoms. She carried the blood of women who never surrendered. Slowly, deliberately. Isabella reached for the Montenegro crown. Victoria instinctively stepped back as Isabella's fingers closed around the ancient gold and precious stones. You want to know what this crown represents? Isabella asked, her voice steady and deadly quiet. It represents 15 generations of women who never backed down from a fight. It represents queens who turned small kingdoms into empires. She lifted the crown, feeling its familiar weight in her hands. This crown has never sat on the head of a pretender, and it never will. Isabella placed the crown on her own head, where it belonged. Immediately, her posture changed. Her shoulders straightened, her chin lifted, and her eyes blazed with the fire of her ancestors. Victoria, she said, her voice carrying the authority of centuries of royal blood. You seem to be under the impression that being a queen is about beauty and charm. Let me educate you. Being a queen is about power, real power, the kind that destroys enemies completely and permanently. Victoria's confident smile faltered slightly. Isabella, you're being theatrical. Am I? Isabella interrupted. Tell me, Victoria, what do you know about Blackwood Financial Empire? Do you know how it was actually built? Alexander frowned. Isabella, what are you talking about? Isabella smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Oh, my dear husband, did you really think I was just some decorative wife who happened to have useful European connections? Did you really believe that 40% of your empire's initial capital came from some vague investment partnerships? The color began to drain from Alexander's face. What are you saying? I'm saying that Montenegro Holdings isn't just a partner in Blackwood Empire. We own 40% of it. I own 40% of it. And according to the prenuptial agreement you signed, the one my lawyers insisted on infidelity, voids your controlling interest? Victoria looked confused. What does that mean? Isabella's smile grew wider and more dangerous. It means, my dear Victoria, that you've been auditioning for a throne that doesn't belong to the man you're seducing. Alexander's face had gone completely white. Isabella, you can't be serious. Dead serious, Isabella replied. You want to replace me. You want Victoria to wear my crown. Fine. But you'll be doing it as employees of Montenegro Holdings, not as the owners of Blackwood Empire. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Oh, and Alexander, Victoria, enjoy your little celebration tonight, because tomorrow Your world is going to change completely." As Isabella walked away, the Montenegro crown glittering on her head like a declaration of war, she could hear Victoria's panicked voice behind her. "Alexander, what is she talking about? What does she mean?" But Isabella didn't wait to hear his answer. She had work to do. The queen was going to take back her throne. The next morning dawned gray and cold over Los Angeles, matching Isabella's mood as she sat in her private study in the Blackwood estate. She hadn't slept, couldn't sleep after the devastating discovery in Alexander's office. Instead, she had spent the night on her laptop, making phone calls and reviewing legal documents. The Montenegro crown sat on her desk like a talisman, catching the early morning light and casting rainbow reflections across the mahogany surface. Isabella touched her belly gently, feeling Adrian's reassuring movements. "Your daddy made a very big mistake." "Little one," she whispered. "But don't worry. Mommy's going to make sure you inherit what's rightfully yours." Her first call had been to Marcus Giovanni, a private investigator whose discretion was legendary among the wealthy elite. Marcus had worked for her father years ago, when the Montenegro family had been dealing with corporate espionage in their European holdings. "Mrs. Blackwood?" Marcus's gravelly voice came through her phone at precisely 8 a.m. "I've got some information for you." Isabella had hired Marcus to conduct a complete background investigation on Victoria Sterling, and what he'd discovered was beyond what she had imagined. "First, the bad news," Marcus continued. "Victoria Sterling isn't her real name. Her real name is Vivian Santos. She's originally from Miami, and she's got quite the rap sheet." Isabella's blood chilled. "What kind of rap sheet?" "3 counts of fraud, 2 counts of identity theft, and 1 count of extortion. She's made a career out of seducing wealthy men, gaining their trust, then systematically draining their accounts. She's been doing this for at least 7 years." Isabella closed her eyes, feeling nauseous. "And Alexander has no idea. None whatsoever. She's good at what she does. Creates an entire fake identity, fake education credentials, fake family background, fake everything. According to my sources, she didn't even graduate high school, let alone Columbia Business School like she claimed." "What else?" Isabella asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. "She's pregnant," Marcus said. "But here's the interesting part. According to medical records I was able to access, she was already pregnant before she met your husband. The timeline doesn't match up." Isabella felt the room spin around her. "Are you saying the baby isn't Alexander's?" "That's exactly what I'm saying. There's a man named Carlos Mendoza in Miami who she's been in contact with regularly. He's the father of her child, and according to phone records, they're planning to disappear once she's extracted enough money from your husband." Isabella set down her phone with shaking hands. Victoria wasn't just a mistress, she was a professional con artist who had targeted Alexander specifically. And Alexander, blinded by lust and midlife crisis, had fallen for it completely. "There's more," Marcus continued. "Over the past 6 months, Victoria has convinced your husband to transfer approximately $3 million to various offshore accounts. She told him it was for strategic investments in emerging markets." $3 million, Isabella repeated numbly. "All of which has been funneled to accounts in the Cayman Islands that she controls. Mrs. Blackwood, your husband is being systematically robbed, and he doesn't even know it." Isabella felt her anger crystallizing into something cold and calculated. Victoria hadn't just stolen her husband, she was stealing his money, planning to destroy him financially, and then disappear with another man's baby. "Marcus, I need you to document everything. Bank records, medical records, phone records, evidence of the fraud. Everything that will hold up in court. Already on it, Mrs. Blackwood. But there's something else you should know." "What?" "I did some digging into your husband's business practices, and there are some irregularities there too. Nothing illegal, but some deals that might not look good under scrutiny. I think Victoria might be planning to use that information against him." Isabella's mind raced. Victoria wasn't just planning to rob Alexander. She was planning to destroy him completely. probably to prevent him from coming after her when he discovered the truth. After ending the call with Marcus, Isabella made her second important phone call of the day to Diana Blackwood, Alexander's mother, who was currently residing in her villa in Monte Carlo. Isabella, darling, Diana's cultured voice came through the international connection. How lovely to hear from you. How is my grandson? Diana had always treated Isabella like the daughter she'd never had, a formidable woman in her own right. Diana had built her own fortune in real estate before marrying Alexander's father. She was one of the few people who knew the true financial structure of the Blackwood Empire. Diana, I need to tell you something about Alexander, Isabella began, and then poured out the entire story of the affair, Victoria's true identity, the theft, everything. Diana's silence stretched for a long moment after Isabella finished. When she finally spoke, her voice was arctic. That little fool, Diana said, and Isabella knew she was referring to Alexander, not Victoria. He's forgotten who he really is and where his money actually came from. What do you mean? Isabella asked. Isabella, dear, when your families arranged your marriage, it wasn't just about love, though I know you and Alexander genuinely cared for each other. It was about power. The Montenegro holdings that were transferred into the Blackwood Empire weren't just investments. They were the foundation of everything Alexander has built. Isabella had known this, but hearing Diana confirm it made it more real. Without Montenegro capital, Alexander would still be working at some mid-level investment firm, Diana continued. The ungrateful boy seems to have forgotten that he owes his entire empire to your family's generosity. Diana, I want to call a board meeting, Isabella said. I want to exercise my rights as a Montenegro Holdings representative. Diana's laugh was sharp and pleased. Oh, my dear girl, I think it's time my son learned a very important lesson about respecting the women in his life. Consider it done. Isabella's third call was to her own family's attorney, James Morrison, who had handled Montenegro family business for over 30 years. Isabella, James's warm voice was a comfort. I was wondering when you'd call. I've been keeping an eye on the Blackwood financial reports, and I've noticed some concerning irregularities. James, I need to know exactly what my rights are regarding the Blackwood Empire, Isabella said. And I need to know what happens if Alexander is found to be in breach of our marriage contract. Well, James said slowly, that's a complicated question with a very simple answer. According to the prenuptial agreement in the partnership documents, if Alexander engages in adultery or any behavior that damages the Montenegro family reputation, all Montenegro holdings become subject to recall, meaning you could potentially take control of the entire empire. The Montenegro family would become the majority shareholders, and you, as the Montenegro representative, would become the controlling partner. Isabella felt something like hope beginning to bloom in her chest. And legally, this would be binding. Absolutely. Your grandfather was a very smart man when he structured these agreements. He made sure that Montenegro interests would always be protected. James, I want you to prepare all the necessary paperwork. I'm going to call a board meeting for tomorrow. Consider it done. And Isabella, your grandfather would be very proud of you. As Isabella ended her calls, she felt the baby kick strongly, as if Adrian was responding to her newfound determination. She looked at the Montenegro crown on her desk, thinking about all the strong women who had worn it before her. You know what, little one, she said to her unborn son. Mommy isn't going to wait to be rescued. Mommy's going to do the rescuing herself. Isabella spent the rest of the morning crafting her strategy. She would need to move carefully, legally, and decisively. Victoria and Alexander thought they had outmaneuvered her, but they had underestimated exactly who they were dealing with. Isabella Montenegro wasn't just a pregnant wife who had been betrayed. She was the heir to a financial dynasty that had survived wars, revolutions, and economic collapses. She was a woman who had been raised from birth to protect her family's legacy, and she was about to remind everyone exactly what that meant. That afternoon, Isabella drove to a small cafe in Beverly Hills where she had arranged to meet Victoria. She had sent a simple text, We need to talk. Canyon Coffee, 3 p.m. Come alone. Isabella arrived early, choosing a corner table where she could see the entire cafe. She ordered herbal tea and waited. The Montenegro crown safely locked in her car, but its presence still felt like armor around her. Victoria arrived exactly on time, looking nervous despite her attempts to appear confident. She wore a white designer dress that emphasized her figure, and expensive jewelry that Isabella now realized had been purchased with Alexander's stolen money. Isabella, Victoria said, sliding into the seat across from her. I'm surprised you wanted to meet. Are you? Isabella asked mildly. I would think you'd expect me to want to discuss your relationship with my husband. Victoria's smile was practiced and fake. There's really nothing to discuss. Alexander has made his choice. Has he? Isabella sipped her tea calmly. Tell me, Vivian, does he know about Carlos? Victoria went completely still. The color drained from her face so quickly that Isabella thought she might faint. I'm sorry, what did you call me? Vivian Santos, Isabella said clearly. Born in Miami 25 years ago, high school dropout, 3 arrests for fraud, currently wanted in Florida for writing bad checks. Victoria's hand trembled as she reached for her water glass. I don't know what you're talking about. Isabella opened her purse and pulled out a manila folder. She placed it on the table between them and opened it to reveal police booking photos, arrest records, and financial documents. These are copies, Isabella said conversationally. The originals are with my attorney, along with evidence that you've stolen over $3 million from my husband. Victoria stared at the documents like they were poisonous snakes. How did you... I'm not some naive housewife. Vivian, Isabella interrupted. I'm a Montenegro. We've been protecting our family interests for 3 centuries. Did you really think I wouldn't investigate the woman trying to steal my life? Victoria's composure cracked completely. What do you want? I want you to disappear, Isabella said simply. Pack your things, leave Los Angeles, and never contact Alexander again. Do this, and I won't press charges. Victoria's eyes flashed with anger. And if I don't, Isabella smiled, and it was the kind of smile that had launched warships, then I'll destroy you so completely that Carlos won't even remember your name. You can't prove anything, Victoria said desperately. Isabella turned a page in the folder, revealing bank transfer records. $3 million transferred to Cayman Islands accounts in your name. Medical records showing you were pregnant before you met Alexander. Phone records of daily calls to Carlos Mendoza. Victoria's breathing became rapid and shallow. Alexander loves me. He'll never believe you. Will he? Isabella asked. Let's see. On one hand, he has his wife of 3 years, mother of his child, member of a family that has supported his business empire. On the other hand, he has a con artist who's been stealing his money and lying about everything, including whose baby she's carrying. Victoria was silent for a long moment, staring at the evidence spread before her. When she looked up, her eyes were filled with a desperation that was almost pitiable. You don't understand, she said quietly. I need this money. Carlos and we owe some very dangerous people. That's not my problem, Isabella replied without sympathy. You had a choice of how to solve your money problems, and you chose to destroy my family. Now you have to live with the consequences. Victoria suddenly leaned forward, her voice becoming vicious. You think you've won. You think Alexander will just come crawling back to you. He told me he never loved you. He told me you were just a business arrangement. Isabella felt the words hit her like physical blows, but she kept her expression neutral. Perhaps, but business arrangements are built on legal contracts. Love affairs are built on lies. Which do you think will survive in court? Victoria realized she was beaten. Her shoulders slumped in defeat. How long do I have? 24 hours, Isabella said, closing the folder. Disappear completely, or I'll have you arrested for theft, fraud, and conspiracy. As Isabella stood to leave, Victoria grabbed her wrist. Why are you being so generous? Why not just destroy me now? Isabella looked down at the desperate woman who had tried to steal her life. Because I'm not you, Vivian. I don't destroy people for pleasure. I destroy them when they threaten my family. Isabella pulled her wrist free and walked away, leaving Victoria sitting alone with the evidence of her crimes spread across the table. As she drove home, Isabella felt the baby kick again, and she smiled for the first time in 24 hours. "Don't worry, Adrian," she said softly. "Mommy is just getting started." Tomorrow was the board meeting. Tomorrow she would take back everything that belonged to her family. Tomorrow she would claim her throne. The boardroom on the 60th floor of Blackwood Tower had witnessed many corporate battles, but none quite like what was about to unfold. Isabella arrived 30 minutes early, wearing a navy blue Armani power suit that emphasized her authority rather than her pregnancy. The Montenegro crown sat regally atop her head, not as jewelry, but as a symbol of the ancient power she represented. She had spent the previous evening in preparation, reviewing every document, every contract, every legal precedent that would support her claim. James Morrison, her family's attorney, had flown in from New York and sat beside her now, his briefcase containing enough legal ammunition to level a corporate empire. The conference table was set for 12, the full board of directors of Blackwood Financial Empire. Isabella had specifically requested that Victoria be present as well, ostensibly as Alexander's strategic advisor, but really so that everyone could witness her humiliation. Diana Blackwood entered first, elegant and formidable in a charcoal gray suit. She kissed Isabella's cheek and whispered, "It's time my son learned what happens when you cross a Montenegro woman." The other board members filed in titans of finance and industry who had built their fortunes alongside Alexander. They were all men over 50, with the arrogance that came from never having been truly challenged. Isabella watched them taking their seats, noting their dismissive glances at her crown, their condescending smiles at her presence. They had no idea what was coming. Alexander entered with Victoria at his side, and Isabella felt a stab of pain at how beautiful they looked together. Alexander wore his confidence like armor, clearly believing he controlled this meeting. Victoria had chosen a red dress that was stunning but entirely inappropriate for a board meeting, the kind of outfit a mistress would wear, not a strategic advisor. "Isabella," Alexander said as he took his seat at the head of the table, "I have to say, I'm surprised you called this meeting, and the crown is an interesting choice." "I thought it was appropriate," Isabella replied calmly, "given that we're here to discuss Montenegro family interests in this company." Alexander frowned. "I'm not sure what you mean by that." James Morrison opened his briefcase and began distributing documents around the table. "Gentlemen, what you're receiving are copies of the original partnership agreements between Montenegro Holdings and Blackwood Financial Empire, signed at the time of Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood's marriage." Isabella watched as the board members scanned the documents, their expressions growing increasingly concerned. She had deliberately kept the true extent of Montenegro's involvement in the company quiet over the years, allowing Alexander to maintain the illusion that he was solely responsible for his success. "As you can see," James continued, "Montenegro Holdings provided 40% of the initial capital for Blackwood Financial Empire. This investment was structured as a partnership agreement with very specific terms." Board member Richard Hayes, a longtime friend of Alexander's, looked up from his documents. "I don't understand. Are you saying Montenegro owns 40% of this company?" "Not exactly," Isabella said, standing slowly. Even heavily pregnant, she commanded the room's attention. "According to these agreements, Montenegro Holdings owns 40% of Blackwood Financial Empire as long as the marriage between Alexander Blackwood and Isabella Montenegro remains intact and both parties honor their commitments." Alexander's face had gone pale. "Isabella, what are you doing?" "I'm protecting my family's interests," Isabella replied. "Something I should have done a long time ago." Victoria, who had been silent until now, suddenly spoke up. "I don't understand what any of this has to do with me." Isabella smiled, and every person in the room felt the temperature drop. "Oh, Vivian, it has everything to do with you." Victoria's eyes widened in terror at the use of her real name. Alexander looked confused. Vivian Isabella? What are you talking about? Isabella nodded to James, who opened another folder. Alexander, I'd like you to meet the real Victoria Sterling, whose actual name is Vivian Santos. The projector screen behind Isabella lit up with police booking photos, arrest records, and financial documents. The board members leaned forward, studying the images with growing alarm. Vivian Santos, Isabella continued, her voice carrying the authority of a prosecuting attorney. Age 25, high school dropout from Miami, 3 arrests for fraud, 2 for identity theft, 1 for extortion. She has made a career out of seducing wealthy men and systematically robbing them. Alexander stared at the screen in shock. That's impossible. Victoria graduated from Columbia. She worked for Goldman Sachs. No, Isabella said firmly. Vivian Santos created a fake identity specifically to target you. Her education credentials are forged. Her work history is fabricated. Even her pregnancy is a lie. What do you mean? Alexander's voice was barely a whisper. James distributed another set of documents. Medical records obtained through legal channels show that Ms. Santos was already pregnant when she first approached Mr. Blackwood. The timeline makes it impossible for him to be the father. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Victoria Vivian had gone completely white and was gripping the edge of the table as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. Furthermore, Isabella continued, over the past 6 months, Vivian has convinced Alexander to transfer over $3 million to offshore accounts that she controls. Money that was supposedly for strategic investments, but has actually been stolen. Alexander turned to Victoria with an expression of complete betrayal. Tell me this isn't true. Tell me Isabella is lying. Victoria's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. No sound came out. The bank records don't lie, Isabella said. The medical records don't lie. The police records don't lie. The only person who has been lying is sitting right there in the red dress. Board member Thomas Chen spoke up. If this is true, then Mr. Blackwood has not only violated his marriage contract, but has also exposed the company to significant financial liability. Exactly, Isabella said. Which brings us to the real purpose of this meeting. She walked around the table, the Montenegro crown catching the light with each step. Every eye in the room followed her. According to the partnership agreements, if Alexander violates the terms of our marriage through adultery or behavior that damages the Montenegro family reputation, all Montenegro holdings become subject to immediate recall. Alexander finally found his voice. What does that mean exactly? James Morrison answered. It means, Mr. Blackwood, that your wife now controls 65% of this company, the 40% from Montenegro Holdings, plus the 25% that transfers to her as penalty for your breach of contract. The silence in the room was deafening. Isabella could hear her own heartbeat, could feel Adrian kicking as if he sensed the magnitude of the moment. You're telling me, Alexander said slowly, that Isabella now owns controlling interest in my company. Your company. Isabella's voice cracked like a whip. Alexander, this was never your company. It was built with my family's money, supported by my family's connections, and secured by my family's reputation. You were the CEO, but you were never the owner. She placed her hands on the conference table and leaned forward. You wanted to replace me with a con artist. You wanted her to wear my crown and sit on my throne, but you forgot one very important thing. What's that? Alexander asked, his voice defeated. You can't give away what was never yours to begin with. Victoria suddenly stood up, her chair clattering backward. This is insane, Alexander. You can't let her do this. Isabella turned to face her. Vivian, you have exactly 1 minute to leave this building voluntarily before I have security escort you out. You can't do this to me, Victoria screamed. Alexander loves me. We have plans. Had, Isabella corrected. You had plans. Plans to steal his money and disappear with your real boyfriend, Carlos. Plans that are now over. Victoria looked around the room desperately. but every face was turned against her. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. "Security," Isabella said into the conference room phone. "Please escort Ms. Santos from the building. She is no longer welcome here." As security guards entered the room, Victoria made one last desperate play. She lunged toward Isabella, clearly intending to attack the pregnant woman. But Diana Blackwood, despite being in her 60s, moved with lightning speed. She caught Victoria's wrist and twisted it with the efficiency of someone who had learned self-defense in finishing school. "Touch my daughter-in-law, and I'll make sure you spend the next decade in prison," Diana said quietly. Victoria was led away screaming threats and curses, her voice echoing down the hallway until the elevator doors finally closed. Isabella turned back to the board members, all of whom were staring at her with a mixture of awe and terror. "Gentlemen," she said calmly, "I believe we have some business to discuss." Alexander stood up slowly. "Isabella, please, can we talk about this privately?" Isabella looked at her husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, with something that might have been pity. "Alexander, you made your choice when you decided Victoria was what you needed. Now you get to live with the consequences. But the company, this is my life's work." "No," Isabella corrected. "This is my family's life's work. You were just the face we put on it." She turned to the board members. "Gentlemen, I'm calling for an immediate vote of no confidence in Alexander Blackwood as CEO. All in favor." Every hand in the room went up, including Diana's. "Motion carried," Isabella said. "I hereby assume the position of CEO of Blackwood Financial Empire, effective immediately." Alexander slumped in his chair, the full magnitude of his losses finally hitting him. "Isabella, what about our marriage? What about our son?" Isabella's hand went to her belly. "Our son will inherit what is rightfully his, a company built on honor and integrity, not lies and betrayal. As for our marriage," she removed her wedding ring and placed it on the conference table. "Some things, once broken, cannot be repaired." She walked toward the door, then paused. "Alexander, you can remain with the company as Regional Director of West Coast Operations. Your salary will be $200,000 annually. That's more than generous, considering." Considering what?" he asked bitterly. Isabella looked back at him, the Montenegro crown glittering on her head like a declaration of victory. "Considering you tried to give away a throne that was never yours to a woman who never deserved it." As Isabella left the boardroom, she could hear the murmurs of the board members behind her, already discussing the transition of power. She had done it. She had taken back everything that belonged to her family, but more importantly, she had ensured that her son would inherit his birthright. The Queen had reclaimed her throne. 6 months after the boardroom confrontation that shook the financial world, Isabella Montenegro Blackwood stood on the balcony of her new penthouse office, holding her 3-month-old son Adrian in her arms. The baby had his father's dark hair, but his mother's striking green eyes, and already showed signs of the intelligence that ran in both bloodlines. The office had been completely redesigned since Isabella took control of Blackwood Financial Empire. Gone were Alexander's dark leather and masculine angles, replaced with elegant marble, crystal chandeliers, and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of Los Angeles. The Montenegro crown sat in a bulletproof display case, no longer just a family heirloom, but a symbol of corporate power that commanded respect throughout the financial world. "Look at your kingdom, little prince," Isabella whispered to Adrian, who gurgled contentedly in her arms. "One day, all of this will be yours. But remember what Mommy learned. True power isn't given, it's earned." The transformation of Blackwood Financial Empire under Isabella's leadership had been nothing short of miraculous. In 6 months, she had increased company profits by 300% by pivoting towards sustainable investments and green energy initiatives. Her connections to European nobility had opened doors that Alexander never could have imagined, and her Harvard MBA had proven that she was far more than a decorative wife. Isabella had restructured the company into Montenegro Blackwood Holdings, officially acknowledging the family partnership that had always existed behind the scenes. She had also established the Montenegro Foundation, a charitable organization with an initial endowment of $100 million, focused on supporting women who had survived domestic abuse and betrayal. The business press had dubbed her the Queen of Wall Street West, and Forbes had recently featured her on their cover with the headline, "From Crown to Corporation, the Woman Who Redefined Power." But Isabella's greatest pride came from the knowledge that she had built something worthy of passing down to her son. A knock at her office door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called. Her assistant, Maria, entered with a smile. "Mrs. Blackwood, your 2 o'clock appointment is here?" Isabella checked her Cartier watch, a gift from the Queen of Spain, congratulating her on her business success. "Send him in, please." Prince Eduardo Martinez of Monaco entered the office, and Isabella felt her heart skip a beat as it did every time she saw him. Eduardo was everything Alexander had never been: kind, intelligent, genuinely interested in her thoughts and opinions, and completely supportive of her business ambitions. They had met at a charity gala in Monte Carlo, where Isabella had been the keynote speaker about women's empowerment in finance. Eduardo had approached her afterward, not to flirt or impress her, but to discuss her fascinating insights about microfinance in developing countries. Their relationship had grown slowly, built on mutual respect and shared values. "Isabella," Eduardo said, his Spanish accent adding warmth to her name. "You look radiant." Eduardo was 34, a year younger than Isabella, with the kind of classical good looks that graced royal portraits. But what attracted Isabella most was his intelligence and his genuine commitment to using his royal platform for charitable work. He ran education programs throughout Europe and had earned a PhD in international development from Oxford. "Thank you," Isabella replied, shifting Adrian to one arm so she could greet Eduardo properly. "How was your flight from Monaco?" "Long, but worth it to see you both," Eduardo said, gently stroking Adrian's cheek. The baby immediately grabbed Eduardo's finger and held on tightly, making both adults laugh. Over the months, Eduardo had become a constant presence in their lives, treating Adrian like his own son and supporting Isabella's demanding career without ever trying to overshadow her achievements. Unlike Alexander, who had seen her royal connections as tools for his own advancement, Eduardo appreciated Isabella for who she was as a person. "How's the little prince today?" Eduardo asked, taking Adrian into his experienced arms. As an uncle to 7 nieces and nephews, Eduardo was comfortable with babies in a way that Alexander never had been. "He's been very attentive during our board meeting this morning," Isabella said with a smile. "I think he's going to be a natural businessman." "Just like his mother," Eduardo replied, settling into one of the comfortable chairs near Isabella's desk. "Speaking of which, how did the European expansion meeting go?" Isabella's eyes lit up with excitement. "Better than expected. The consortium has agreed to our terms for the renewable energy project in Spain. We'll be building solar farms that will power half of Andalusia within 5 years." "That's incredible," Eduardo said, and his pride in her accomplishments was genuine and obvious. "You're changing the world." "Isabella, we're changing the world," Isabella corrected. "This project wouldn't be possible without your contacts in the Spanish government." Their partnership was everything her marriage to Alexander should have been: 2 people supporting each other's dreams and building something greater together than either could achieve alone. A soft chime from Isabella's computer indicated a video call. She glanced at the screen inside. "It's the quarterly review with the board. Would you mind staying? I'd like their input on the Monaco development project." "Of course," Eduardo said, settling back with Adrian, who was now fast asleep in his arms. Isabella activated the video conference, and the faces of board members from around the world appeared on her wall-mounted screen. These were no longer the dismissive older men who had underestimated her 6 months ago. Isabella had systematically replaced half the board with brilliant women and progressive men who shared her vision for ethical business practices. "Good afternoon, everyone," Isabella began. "I'm pleased to report that our Q3 profits are up 40% over last quarter, and our sustainability index has reached the highest rating in the industry." Board member Sarah Chen, the former CEO of a tech company, smiled from her office in Singapore. Isabella, the renewable energy division is exceeding all projections. The press is calling Montenegro Blackwood the most forward-thinking financial company in the world. The press is right, added Dr. Rachel Freeman from London, a former investment banker who now focused on ethical investing. Our client base has grown by 60% this quarter alone. Everyone wants to work with a company that puts values before pure profit. Isabella felt a warmth that had nothing to do with professional success. She had built something she could be proud of, something worthy of the Montenegro name. There is one piece of business I'd like to discuss, Isabella said. Prince Eduardo has proposed a partnership opportunity in Monaco, a development project that would create affordable housing while maintaining the principality's environmental standards. Eduardo briefly outlined the project, speaking with the passion and expertise that had first attracted Isabella to him. The board members asked intelligent questions and offered enthusiastic support. After the call ended, Isabella leaned back in her chair, feeling the satisfaction of a job well done. "Thank you for that presentation," she told Eduardo. "Your project is going to help so many families." "Thank you for making it possible," Eduardo replied. "Together, we can accomplish things neither of us could do alone." Isabella studied his face, seeing the sincerity and warmth that still sometimes surprised her after Alexander's coldness. "Eduardo, can I ask you something, anything? Why me? You could have any woman in the world. Why choose a divorced single mother with a complicated business empire?" Eduardo was quiet for a moment, gently rocking the sleeping Adrian. "Do you know what I first noticed about you at that gala in Monte Carlo? My speech about microfinance." Eduardo smiled. "Your crown, not the Montenegro crown, though that's beautiful, but the invisible crown. The way you carried yourself, the way you commanded respect without demanding it, the way you cared more about helping others than impressing anyone." He met her eyes directly. "Isabella, you are the most remarkable woman I've ever met. You took betrayal and turned it into strength. You took loss and turned it into gain. You took a crown that was just jewelry and turned it into real power." Isabella felt tears prick her eyes. "Eduardo, I'm not finished," he said gently. "Adrian is not an inconvenience or a complication. He's a gift, and I would be honored to help you raise him, if you'll let me." Before Isabella could respond, her assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Mrs. Blackwood, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Mr. Alexander Blackwood is here. He says it's urgent." Isabella and Eduardo exchanged glances. Alexander had been working as regional director for 6 months, doing his job competently but with none of his former arrogance. He had attempted to apologize to Isabella several times, but she had made it clear that their relationship was purely professional now. "Send him in," Isabella said. Alexander entered the office looking older than his 35 years. The stress of losing everything had aged him, and he carried himself with the defeated posture of a man who had learned hard lessons too late. "Isabella," he said, then noticed Eduardo holding Adrian. His face tightened with an emotion that might have been jealousy or regret. "I didn't realize you had company." "Prince Eduardo is my business partner," Isabella said coolly. "What did you need?" "Alexander." Alexander seemed to struggle with his words. I wanted to give you this." He placed an envelope on her desk. "It's my resignation." Isabella frowned. "Your resignation, why?" "Because you've built something incredible here, and I don't want to be the thing that holds it back," Alexander said quietly. "Everyone knows our history. Having me here, even in a reduced capacity, creates complications." Isabella opened the envelope and scanned the formal resignation letter. "Where will you go?" "I've been offered a position with a consulting firm in Chicago. It's a chance to start over. Away from all of this." He gestured around the office that had once been his domain. "Alexander," Isabella said, her voice softer than it had been in months. "You don't have to leave. Despite everything, you're still Adrian's father." Alexander looked at his son sleeping peacefully in Eduardo's arms. "I know, and I want to be part of his life, but I can do that without working here." He turned to Eduardo. Your Highness, I know I have no right to ask this, but please take care of them. They deserve better than I ever gave them. Eduardo nodded solemnly. They will always be safe and loved. Alexander looked back at Isabella one last time. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For all of it, you deserve so much better. Yes, Isabella agreed simply. I did. After Alexander left, Isabella sat in contemplative silence. Eduardo placed the sleeping Adrian in his bassinet and moved to stand behind Isabella's chair, placing gentle hands on her shoulders. How do you feel? He asked. Free, Isabella said after a moment. For the first time in years, completely free. Eduardo leaned down and kissed the top of her head. Good, because I have something I want to ask you. Isabella turned in her chair to face him. Eduardo had moved to kneel beside her chair, and he was holding a small velvet box. Eduardo, what are you? Isabella Montenegro Blackwood, Eduardo said formally. You are the most magnificent woman I have ever known. You are brilliant, compassionate, strong, and beautiful. You are an incredible mother and an inspiring leader. He opened the box to reveal the most beautiful ring Isabella had ever seen, not ostentatious like her first engagement ring, but elegant and timeless, with a perfect emerald surrounded by diamonds. Will you marry me? Eduardo asked. Will you let me spend my life supporting your dreams and helping you raise Adrian? Will you be my queen? Not because I need one, but because you deserve a kingdom worthy of your crown. Isabella looked down at the man kneeling beside her chair, offering her not just marriage but true partnership. She thought about her journey from betrayed wife to corporate queen, from victim to victor. Yes, she whispered and then louder. Yes, of course, yes. Eduardo slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. As he stood to kiss her, Adrian woke up and began to coo happily, as if he approved of the engagement. When Eduardo asked against her lips, Soon, Isabella replied, but first we have a company to run and a world to change. Eduardo laughed. I wouldn't expect anything less from the Queen of Montenegro, Blackwood Holdings. As the sun set over Los Angeles, casting golden light through the office windows, Isabella stood with her fiancé and her son, looking out over the empire she had built from the ashes of betrayal. The Montenegro crown glittered in its case, no longer just a family heirloom, but a symbol of the power that came from knowing one's own worth. 6 months ago, Victoria had tried to steal Isabella's crown, thinking it would make her a queen. But she had learned what Isabella had always known. Crowns don't make queens. Queens make crowns meaningful. And Isabella Montenegro Blackwood was every inch a queen. 1 year later, the wedding of Isabella Montenegro Blackwood and Prince Eduardo Martinez of Monaco was hailed as the social event of the decade. Held at the Monaco Royal Palace, it brought together royalty, celebrities, and business leaders from around the world. Isabella wore her grandmother's wedding dress, updated with modern touches, and of course, the Montenegro crown. Adrian, now walking and babbling in 3 languages, served as ring bearer with the help of his new father Eduardo. Alexander attended the ceremony at Isabella's invitation, bringing his new girlfriend, a kind kindergarten teacher from Chicago who loved him for who he was, not what he owned. During her wedding speech, Isabella said, A year ago, I thought my world was ending. I discovered that sometimes, what feels like an ending is actually a beginning in disguise. Today, Montenegro Blackwood Holdings is valued at over $10 billion and is widely regarded as the most ethical and successful financial firm in the world. Isabella has been featured on the cover of Time magazine as one of the most influential women of the year, and her autobiography, From Crown to Throne, A Queen's Journey, has become a bestseller. The Montenegro Foundation has helped over 50,000 women worldwide, providing education, financial support, and legal assistance to those who have faced betrayal and abuse. Isabella personally reads every application and often meets with the women the foundation helps. Victoria Vivian Santos was eventually arrested in Miami for fraud and sentenced to 7 years in prison. Her son is being raised by his father Carlos, who has since turned his life around and works as a mechanic. Isabella has never spoken publicly about Victoria, believing that the best revenge is a life well lived. Adrian Montenegro Martinez Blackwood is now 2 years old and shows signs of inheriting both his mother's business acumen and his stepfather's humanitarian spirit. He speaks 4 languages fluently for a toddler and has already been photographed for several royal family portraits. Isabella still wears the Montenegro crown to important business meetings, not as jewelry, but as a reminder of the strength that flows through her bloodline. It has become her signature, and financial magazines often feature her image with the crown as a symbol of powerful, ethical leadership. When young women write to her asking for advice about dealing with betrayal or building their own empires, Isabella always responds with the same message. Remember that your worth is not determined by how others treat you, but by how you treat yourself. A crown is just metal and stones until it sits on the head of someone worthy of wearing it. Make yourself worthy, and the crown will follow. The Montenegro crown has found its rightful place not as a trophy to be stolen, but as a symbol of the power that comes from integrity, strength, and the unshakable knowledge of one's own worth. And in the boardroom of Montenegro Blackwood Holdings, where decisions that affect millions of people are made daily, it serves as a constant reminder that true queens are not born. They are forged in the fires of adversity and crowned by their own courage. Isabella Montenegro. Blackwood had lost a faithless husband but gained an empire. She had been betrayed by a criminal but found true love with a prince. She had started as a victim but transformed into a victor. Most importantly, she had learned that the most powerful crown of all is the one you place on your own head, the crown of self-respect, determination, and the unwavering belief that you deserve nothing less than the very best that life has to offer. The queen had not just reclaimed her throne. She had built a kingdom worthy of her crown, and that kingdom would endure for generations to come. Picture this: Isabella Sterling, 7 months pregnant, discovers her trusted doctor has vanished overnight. In her place stands a new physician with nervous eyes who insists everything is perfectly normal while avoiding every direct question about her test results. But Isabella knows something is terribly wrong. Her headaches are getting worse, her baby's kicks are getting weaker, and her billionaire husband Richard has suddenly become obsessed with controlling her medical records. When she sneaks into his locked desk drawer, what she finds makes her blood run cold: insurance papers worth $50 million, medical reports showing severe mercury poisoning, and the devastating truth: her baby has been dead for 3 days. The man she trusted with her life has been slowly poisoning her for months, and she's been too trusting to see it. But Richard Sterling made one crucial mistake. He underestimated the fury of a mother who discovers her child has been murdered for money. This is the story of how one woman's search for medical answers uncovered the most calculated betrayal imaginable, and how she turned her husband's perfect crime into his perfect downfall. Like this video if you're ready for the ultimate justice story, and subscribe for more incredible tales of survival and revenge. The morning sun cast golden rays through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the VIP suite at Manhattan Medical Center, illuminating the pristine white walls and expensive floral arrangements. Isabella Martinez Sterling lay on the hospital bed, her hand gently resting on her 7-month pregnant belly, watching the bustling activity of Central Park below. The room was a testament to wealth and privilege: marble floors, a private bathroom larger than most apartments, and a view that cost more per night than many people earned in a month. At 29, Isabella had been living what most would consider a fairy tale. An accomplished architect with a master's degree from Columbia, she had designed several iconic buildings in Manhattan before marrying Richard Sterling 3 years ago. Now, carrying their first child, she had stepped back from her career to focus on becoming a mother, a decision she had made willingly, trusting in the love and security her husband provided. Richard Sterling, 45, was the embodiment of American success. As CEO of Sterling Industries, a real estate empire worth $500 million, he graced the covers of Forbes and Bloomberg regularly. His penthouse apartment overlooked the Hudson River, His garage housed a collection of Ferraris and Lamborghinis, and his private yacht was moored in the Hamptons. To the outside world, Richard was the perfect husband, attentive, generous, and deeply in love with his pregnant wife. "How are you feeling today, my darling?" Richard asked as he entered the room, carrying a bouquet of red roses, Isabella's favorite. His salt and pepper hair was perfectly styled, his Armani suit immaculate despite the early hour. He kissed her forehead tenderly, the gesture practiced and smooth. "The baby's been kicking a lot," Isabella replied, her voice carrying a note of concern. "And these headaches, they're getting worse." "Richard, Dr. Chen said the test results should be back today." Richard's expression flickered for just a moment, so briefly that Isabella almost missed it. "I'm sure everything is fine, sweetheart. You're just tired. Growing a baby is hard work." He squeezed her hand, his grip perhaps a little too tight. "I'll speak with Dr. Chen myself. You know how these doctors can be. They worry about everything." Dr. Amanda Chen, a respected obstetrician in her 40s, had been treating Isabella throughout her pregnancy, known for her meticulous attention to detail and genuine care for her patients. Dr. Chen had noticed some concerning symptoms in Isabella's recent visits. The headaches, the unusual fatigue, and some troubling blood work results had prompted her to order comprehensive tests. As if summoned by their conversation, Dr. Chen knocked and entered the room. Her usual warm smile seemed strained, and Isabella noticed the tension in her shoulders. "Good morning, Isabella? Mr. Sterling?" Dr. Chen's voice was carefully neutral. "I need to speak with you both about the test results." Richard stood immediately. "Doctor, perhaps we could discuss this privately first. I don't want to worry my wife unnecessarily." "Actually, Mr. Sterling, these are Isabella's medical records. She has every right to—" "Of course," Richard interrupted smoothly. "But as you know, Isabella has been under tremendous stress. Perhaps you and I could review the results first, and then we can decide the best way to present them." Isabella felt a chill run down her spine. "Richard, what aren't you telling me, Dr. Chen? Please, it's my body, my baby. I need to know what's wrong." Dr. Chen looked between husband and wife, clearly uncomfortable. "Isabella, there are some irregularities in your blood work that we need to investigate further. I'd like to run some additional tests." "What kind of irregularities?" Isabella's voice rose with panic. Before Dr. Chen could answer, Richard placed a firm hand on the doctor's arm. "Dr. Chen, perhaps you could give us a moment. We'll discuss this as a family first." The doctor hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "I'll be back in an hour." As she left, Isabella caught a glimpse of something in her eyes. Was it fear once they were alone? Richard's demeanor changed subtly. The loving husband facade slipped just enough for Isabella to see something cold underneath. "Isabella, you need to trust me. I'm handling this situation." "Handling what situation, Richard? You're scaring me. What's wrong with our baby?" "Nothing is wrong," he said firmly. "But I've decided that all your medical records should go through me first. I've spoken with the hospital administration. It's for your own protection." Isabella stared at her husband in disbelief. "My own protection from what, Richard? These are my medical records. You can't just—" "I can, and I have." His voice carried a finality that brooked no argument. "I've made a substantial donation to this hospital. Isabella, they understand the importance of discretion." That night, alone in her hospital bed, Isabella couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Richard had left for a business dinner, but she'd overheard him on the phone earlier, speaking in hushed tones about handling the situation and making sure she never finds out. Unable to sleep, Isabella made her way to the nurse's station, hoping to find Dr. Chen. The hallways were dimly lit, and the usual bustle of the day had given way to the quiet efficiency of the night shift. She found Dr. Chen in her office, but the doctor wasn't alone. Through the partially open door, Isabella could hear voices. Richard's voice, cold and authoritative, and Dr. Chen's, strained and defensive. Dr. Chen, let me make this very clear, Richard was saying. My wife is not to see those test results. Ever. Is that understood? Mr. Sterling, this is highly irregular. Isabella has a right to know about her own medical condition. The levels we found, they're dangerous. She needs immediate treatment. She needs what I say she needs. I've made my position clear to the hospital board. Your funding depends on your cooperation. Isabella's blood ran cold. She pressed herself against the wall, straining to hear more. But the baby, Doctor, Chen's voice broke. The baby is no longer your concern. Neither is my wife's. Curiosity about her condition. You will tell her everything is normal, that she just needs rest. And those records you showed me, they disappear permanently. Isabella heard the sound of papers rustling, then Richard's voice again, even colder than before. Dr. Chen, I trust we understand each other. My wife is a very emotional woman. Learning about complications could cause her to do something rash. We wouldn't want that, would we? There was a long pause before Dr. Chen replied, her voice barely above a whisper. I understand, Mr. Sterling. Isabella stumbled back to her room, her mind reeling. What complications was Richard hiding from her? What was wrong with her baby, and why would her own husband, the man she loved and trusted above all others, conspire to keep vital medical information from her as she lay in bed? Isabella felt her baby kick weakly, weaker than usual. She placed both hands on her belly, tears streaming down her face. What's happening to us? Little one, she whispered. What is Daddy hiding? Outside her window, the lights of Manhattan twinkled like stars, but Isabella had never felt more alone or frightened. The perfect life she thought she was living was crumbling around her, and she didn't even know why. The next morning brought more disturbing revelations. When Isabella asked to see Dr. Chen, she was told the doctor was unavailable. A new physician, Dr. Harrison, introduced himself as her new attending physician. Where's Dr. Chen? Isabella demanded. Dr. Chen has been reassigned to other duties. Dr. Harrison replied evasively. I'll be handling your case from now on. When Isabella pressed for details about her test results, Dr. Harrison smiled blandly. Everything looks perfectly normal, Mrs. Sterling. You just need to rest and avoid stress. But Isabella knew he was lying. She could see it in his eyes, in the way he avoided her direct questions, in the nervous energy that surrounded him. Whatever Richard was hiding, it was serious enough to make doctors lie and disappear. That afternoon, while Richard was supposedly at work, Isabella discovered something that made her stomach drop. Hidden in the flowers Richard had brought that morning, she found a small recording device. Her husband was monitoring even her private conversations. As the pieces began to fall into place, Isabella realized with growing horror that she wasn't a patient in this hospital. She was a prisoner, and the man she had loved and trusted with her life was her captor. The question that haunted her as she stared out at the city below was simple yet terrifying: if Richard was willing to go this far to hide her medical records. What exactly was he hiding, and what did he plan to do to ensure his secret stayed buried forever? Little did Isabella know that hundreds of miles away, a woman was already working to uncover the truth, a truth so devastating that it would destroy Richard Sterling's empire and change Isabella's life forever. 3 days later, Isabella was discharged from the hospital with strict orders to rest at home, but home had become another prison. The penthouse that once felt like a palace now felt like a gilded cage, complete with guards disguised as medical staff. Richard had hired 2 private nurses, stern-faced women named Margaret and Susan, who followed Isabella's every move. They monitored her phone calls, restricted her internet access, and reported her daily activities to Richard. When Isabella protested, Richard's response was smooth but firm. Darling, you're carrying our precious child. After what happened at the hospital, I can't take any chances with your health. These ladies are here for your protection. Protection from what Isabella had demanded, but Richard's only response was that patronizing smile that made her skin crawl. Isabella's isolation was nearly complete. Her friends were told she was on bed rest and couldn't receive visitors. Her family in California was informed that she was doing wonderfully, but needed quiet time. Her phone calls were monitored, her emails read, and her movements within the penthouse tracked. But Richard had underestimated his wife. Isabella might have been trapped physically, but her mind was sharp and desperate. She began to notice patterns in her guards' routines, moments when their vigilance might slip. More importantly, she started to piece together the fragments of conversations she overheard, the nervous glances between the nurses, and the way Richard's behavior had subtly changed. The breakthrough came on a rainy Thursday evening. Margaret had stepped out to receive a grocery delivery, and Susan was in the kitchen preparing Isabella's dinner, a special meal that Richard insisted be prepared exactly to his specifications. Isabella seized the moment to slip into Richard's home office. The office was Richard's sanctuary, filled with awards, photos with politicians and celebrities, and a massive desk that commanded a view of the Hudson River. Isabella had always been welcome here before, but now she felt like an intruder in her own home. Her hands shook as she rifled through Richard's papers, not sure what she was looking for, but knowing she would recognize it when she found it. Bank statements, business contracts, correspondence with lawyers. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary until she reached the bottom drawer of his desk. The drawer was locked, but Isabella remembered Richard keeping a spare key taped under the desk from his paranoid business dealings. Her fingers found the small key, and with trembling hands she opened the drawer. What she found inside made her blood run cold. A thick manila folder labeled Insurance Life Policy, Sterling, contained documents she'd never seen before. The policy was for $50 million, with Richard as the sole beneficiary. But it was the fine print that made Isabella's vision blur. The policy contained a clause about death during childbirth, with double indemnity if the death occurred within 30 days of delivery. Beneath the insurance documents were medical reports, her real medical reports, the ones Richard had hidden from her. Isabella's hands shook as she read the damning words. Patient presence with severe mercury poisoning. Blood mercury levels are 400% above safe limits. Fetal development has been severely compromised. Source of contamination appears to be chronic exposure over 6 to 8 months. Immediate chelation therapy required. Pregnancy outcome uncertain. Follow-up report, fetal heartbeat weakening. Patient unaware of condition per family request. Recommend immediate intervention. Note hospital administration has requested all records be sealed pending family consultation. The final report was dated just 3 days ago. Fetal demise confirmed. Patient delivered stillborn male infant during emergency surgery. Patient remains unconscious, unaware of loss. Family has requested complete information suppression until patient is ready to handle the news. Isabella's knees gave out, and she collapsed onto Richard's expensive Persian rug. Her baby, their baby, was dead. Had been dead for 3 days, and Richard had hidden it from her, letting her believe she was still pregnant while he planned. What through her shock and grief? Pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The special meals Richard insisted on preparing, the sudden onset of her symptoms 6 months ago, the mercury poisoning. Richard had been slowly killing her and their baby, and she'd been too trusting to see it. But why? Why would the man she loved want to murder her and their child? The answer came in the form of photographs hidden beneath the medical reports. Pictures of Richard with a stunning blonde woman, their bodies intertwined in intimate poses. More photos showed the same woman with a visible pregnancy bump. The woman wore an engagement ring, a ring Isabella recognized as identical to her own. The photographs were time-stamped from 6 months ago, exactly when Isabella's symptoms had started. A business card fell from between the photos. Victoria Blackwood, heiress, Blackwood Oil Corporation. Written on the back in Richard's handwriting, "Our future starts when the obstacle is removed." Isabella's hands shook as she photographed everything with her phone. The insurance policy, the medical reports, the pictures of Richard and Victoria. She was just finishing when she heard footsteps in the hallway. "Mrs. Sterling, where are you?" Susan's voice called out. Isabella quickly replaced everything exactly as she'd found it and slipped out of the office just as Susan rounded the corner. "There you are. You shouldn't be wandering around. Mr. Sterling specifically said you need to rest." That night, Isabella lay in bed pretending to sleep while Richard sat beside her, stroking her hair with the same hands that had been poisoning her for months. When he finally left for his study, she waited another hour before carefully removing the phone hidden under her mattress. With trembling fingers, she dialed the number on the business card she'd found tucked behind one of the medical reports, a card that had fallen out when she'd photographed the evidence. It was for a law firm, Mitchell and Associates, protecting women's rights. The phone rang twice before a professional voice answered. "Sarah Mitchell's office. Emergency line." "Please," Isabella whispered, barely audible. "I need help. My husband is trying to kill me, and he's hidden the fact that my baby is dead. I have proof." There was a pause, then Sarah Mitchell's voice, suddenly alert and focused. "Ma'am, I need you to listen carefully. Are you in immediate danger?" I don't know. He's been poisoning me. Mercury. The baby is already dead, but he hasn't told me. I found insurance papers. $50 million. Where are you calling from? My home. But I'm being watched. Nurses. They report everything to him. I'm going to give you an address. Tomorrow, when your husband leaves for work, you need to find a way to get there. Can you do that? Isabella thought of Margaret and Susan, of the cameras Richard had installed, of the prison her life had become. "I'll find a way." "Good. One more thing. Do not eat or drink anything your husband gives you. Nothing at all. Do you understand?" "Yes. We're going to get you out of this. Isabella, you're not alone anymore." The next morning, Isabella put her plan into action. She complained of severe nausea and asked Susan to prepare some tea to settle her stomach. While Susan was in the kitchen, Isabella slipped out through the service entrance, a route she'd memorized from watching the building's maintenance staff. Her heart pounded as she took the service elevator down 40 floors, expecting at any moment to be caught. But luck was with her. The morning shift change provided just enough distraction for her to slip out through the building's loading dock. 20 minutes later, Isabella sat in Sarah Mitchell's office, a cramped but warm space filled with case files and legal books. Sarah herself was a woman in her late 30s with steel gray eyes and the bearing of someone who'd fought many battles and won most of them. "Show me what you found," Sarah said without preamble. Isabella pulled out her phone, her hands still shaking as she scrolled through the photographs. Sarah's expression grew darker with each image. "My God," Sarah breathed as she read the medical reports. "Isabella, do you understand what this means? Your husband didn't just commit adultery. He committed premeditated murder, your baby's murder, and he was planning to murder you too." The words hit Isabella like physical blows. Even though she'd suspected it, hearing it confirmed by a legal professional made it real in a way that photographs couldn't. "Can we prove it?" Isabella asked through her tears. "With what you've shown me, absolutely. But we need more. We need Dr. Chen's testimony. We need samples of the food he's been giving you. And we need to establish his motive beyond just the insurance money." Sarah leaned forward. "Isabella, I've been investigating your husband for 2 months." "What?" "Waiwana Dr. Chen contacted me 6 weeks ago. She couldn't live with what your husband was forcing her to do. She's been secretly documenting everything, and she's willing to testify, but she needed time to build an airtight case." Isabella felt a surge of gratitude mixed with grief. Dr. Chen had been trying to help her all along, forced to stay silent by Richard's threats and bribes. "There's something else," Sarah continued. "Victoria Blackwood isn't just your husband's mistress. She's pregnant with his child, and her father's oil company is in serious financial trouble. Richard has been secretly propping them up with loans from Sterling Industries, loans that technically constitute embezzlement of shareholder funds. So he was stealing money to help his pregnant mistress while poisoning his pregnant wife. Exactly. And here's the kicker. Victoria's father has been pressuring Richard to marry his daughter to legitimize their business relationship. But your prenuptial agreement states that if Richard commits adultery and divorces you, he loses 80% of his assets. Isabella's mind reeled. So the only way for him to keep his money and marry Victoria was to murder you and collect on the insurance policy. $50 million, plus he keeps his company, plus he gets Victoria and her father's oil connections. In Richard's mind, it was the perfect crime. Sarah pulled out a thick legal folder. Isabella, I need you to understand something. What we're about to do isn't just about getting you justice. It's about stopping a cold-blooded killer who thinks he's above the law because he has money and power. What do we need to do? First, you're not going back to that penthouse. I've arranged a safe house where Richard can't find you. Second, we're going to let him think his plan is working while we gather the final pieces of evidence. And third, when we're ready, we're going to destroy him so completely that he'll never hurt another woman again. As Isabella left Sarah's office with a new identity and a safe place to stay, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. For the first time since her nightmare began, she wasn't facing Richard alone, but she also knew that the most dangerous part was yet to come. Richard was a powerful man with everything to lose, and desperate people with unlimited resources were capable of anything. The question was, would they move fast enough to stop him before he realized his perfect victim had become his perfect enemy? The Manhattan Supreme Court had seen many dramatic cases in its long history, but few would compare to what was about to unfold on this crisp October morning. News vans lined the street outside. Reporters jockeyed for position, and Yes and Justice for Isabella was already trending worldwide, though most people didn't yet know why. Richard Sterling stepped out of his Mercedes, immaculately dressed as always, flanked by his team of expensive lawyers from Goldman, Sachs and Associates, the same firm that had gotten 3 Fortune 500 CEOs acquitted of fraud charges in the past year. He was confident, even cocky. After all, he'd received a simple civil lawsuit notice about medical record disclosure. His lawyers had assured him it was probably just Isabella trying to get a bigger divorce settlement. What Richard didn't know was that Isabella hadn't filed for divorce. She'd filed for murder charges. Mr. Sterling, a reporter called out, how do you respond to allegations that you poisoned your pregnant wife and murdered your unborn child? Richard's step faltered for just a moment. I have no idea what you're talking about. This is clearly some kind of misunderstanding. But as he climbed the courthouse steps, he could see something in the reporter's eyes that made his stomach clench with the first tendrils of real fear. This wasn't the usual celebrity scandal coverage. This was the look journalists got when they smelled blood in the water. Inside the courthouse, Richard's confidence evaporated completely when he saw who was waiting for him. Isabella sat at the plaintiff's table, but this wasn't the broken, confused woman he'd left at home 3 days ago. She wore a sharp black suit, her hair pulled back in a severe bun, and her eyes burned with a fury that made Richard step back involuntarily. Beside her sat Sarah Mitchell, surrounded by boxes of evidence and flanked by 2 FBI agents. On the other side of Sarah was Dr. Amanda Chen, who refused to meet Richard's gaze. And in the gallery, Richard spotted faces he recognized, former employees, business associates, and reporters from major news networks. Your Honor, Sarah Mitchell stood as Judge Patricia Williams called the court to order. What we are about to reveal today represents one of the most calculated, cold-blooded murder attempts in New York State history. The defendant, Richard Sterling, systematically poisoned his pregnant wife with mercury over a period of 6 months, resulting in the death of their unborn child and nearly killing Mrs. Sterling herself. Richard's lawyer shot to his feet. Your Honor, this is completely Mr. Davidson, Judge Williams interrupted. You'll have your chance to respond. Please continue. Ms. Mitchell. Sarah walked to the center of the courtroom, her voice carrying clearly to every corner. We will prove that Mr. Sterling committed these crimes for financial gain, specifically to collect $50 million in life insurance while eliminating the only obstacle to his marriage to his pregnant mistress. Victoria Blackwood. The courtroom erupted in murmurs, quickly silenced by the judge's gavel. We will show that Mr. Sterling bribed hospital staff to conceal medical records, threatened a doctor to remain silent about a patient's condition, and when his wife discovered his crime, he attempted to complete the murder he had started months earlier. Sarah pressed a button on her laptop, and the courtroom screens lit up with the first piece of evidence, Richard's insurance policy on Isabella's life. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this policy was taken out 18 months ago, just 6 months after Mr. Sterling began his affair with Victoria Blackwood. Note the clause here, double indemnity for death during childbirth. Richard felt the walls closing in as Sarah methodically presented evidence he thought was safely hidden forever. Medical records showing Isabella's mercury poisoning, photos of him purchasing industrial-grade mercury from a chemical supply company, bank records showing massive transfers to Victoria Blackwood and her father's failing oil company. But it was the audio recordings that destroyed him completely. The defendant believed his conversations were private, Sarah announced as she played the first recording. He was wrong. Richard's voice filled the courtroom, cold and calculating. Dr. Chen, let me make this very clear. My wife is not to see those test results. Ever. Is that understood? Dr. Chen's shaky response. Mr. Sterling, this is highly irregular. Isabella has a right to know about her own medical condition. The levels we found, they're dangerous. She needs immediate treatment. Richard's recorded voice even more chilling. She needs what I say she needs. I've made my position clear to the hospital board. Your funding depends on your cooperation. The jury's faces showed growing horror as the recording continued, but Sarah wasn't finished. She played a second recording, Richard's phone conversation with Victoria Blackwood, captured by the FBI surveillance that had been authorized after Dr. Chen came forward. Everything is going according to plan, darling. Richard's voice echoed through the silent courtroom. Isabella is getting weaker. The doctor says she might not survive another shock to her system. Victoria's voice equally cold. Are you sure no one suspects anything? Completely sure. The medical records are sealed. She'll never know the baby died because of me. And when she dies, we'll have $50 million to start our new life. Several jurors visibly recoiled. In the gallery, reporters frantically typed notes while sketch artists captured the moment Richard Sterling's empire crumbled before their eyes. Dr. Chen took the stand next, her voice breaking as she testified about the pressure Richard had put on her and the other medical staff. I've been a doctor for 20 years, she said, tears streaming down her face. I took an oath to do no harm, to protect my patients. But Mr. Sterling threatened not just my job, but the jobs of everyone in my department. He threatened to pull funding from the children's cancer ward if I told Isabella the truth about her baby. And what was the truth? Dr. Chen, Sarah asked gently. The baby had been dead for 3 days when Isabella was discharged. The mercury poisoning had caused severe fetal abnormalities and eventual cardiac arrest. Isabella should have been told immediately, should have received grief counseling, should have been treated for her own mercury poisoning. Instead, Mr. Sterling made us lie to her while he continued to poison her at home. The prosecution's final witness was FBI agent Maria Rodriguez, who testified about the surveillance operation that had captured Richard's final attempt to murder Isabella. We recorded Mr. Sterling preparing what our lab analysis shows would have been a lethal dose of mercury dissolved in Mrs. Sterling's evening medication. Agent Rodriguez testified, if she had consumed it, she would have died within 12 hours. Richard's lawyer, clearly overwhelmed by the mountain of evidence, attempted a desperate defense. Your Honor, my client admits to the affair, admits to poor judgment, but murder, this is circumstantial evidence at best. Perhaps Mrs. Sterling was exposed to mercury through environmental contamination. Sarah stood for her rebuttal, her voice cutting through the courtroom like a blade. Circumstantial. Let's review the evidence. Mr. Sterling purchased Mercury. He had motive. $50 million in insurance money and freedom to marry his pregnant mistress. He had opportunity, complete control over his wife's food and medication. He bribed hospital staff to conceal evidence. He was recorded discussing her death as a business plan, and he was caught in the act of preparing a final lethal dose. She turned to face Richard directly, her voice rising with righteous fury. This man didn't just commit adultery. He didn't just lie. He systematically murdered an innocent child and attempted to murder the child's mother for money. He corrupted medical professionals, threatened witnesses, and showed not one moment of remorse when confronted with his crimes. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Has the jury reached a verdict? Judge Williams asked. We have, Your Honor, the foreman replied, his voice steady and clear. On the charge of first-degree murder of baby Sterling, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of attempted first-degree murder of Isabella Sterling, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of insurance fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of witness intimidation, we find the defendant guilty. The courtroom exploded. Richard collapsed into his chair as if he'd been shot, his face ashen and his hands shaking. In the gallery, reporters rushed to file their stories. While photographers captured the moment a powerful man realized he'd lost everything. Judge Williams called for order, then delivered the sentence that would echo around the world. Mr. Sterling, in my 30 years on this bench, I have rarely encountered such calculated evil. You murdered your own child and attempted to murder your wife for money. You corrupted the medical profession and made a mockery of the trust that marriage represents. I hereby sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder of your child, plus 25 years for attempted murder, plus 10 years for fraud and witness intimidation. These sentences are to run consecutively, not concurrently. Richard Sterling, once worth $500 million, would spend the rest of his life in prison, but the judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, I am ordering the immediate seizure of all assets belonging to Sterling Industries and Mr. Sterling personally. These assets will be liquidated, with proceeds going to Mrs. Sterling as compensation for her suffering and to establish a foundation for victims of domestic violence. As Richard was led away in handcuffs, Isabella felt something she hadn't experienced in months, a sense of peace. Justice had been served. But more than that, she had found her voice again. She was no longer a victim. She was a survivor, and she was just getting started. 6 months after the trial that captivated the world, Isabella Martinez, she had legally reclaimed her maiden name, stood in the penthouse office of what was once Sterling Industries. The company had been renamed Phoenix Enterprises, symbolizing her own rebirth from the ashes of Richard's betrayal. The transformation was remarkable. Where Richard had hung photographs of himself with politicians and celebrities, Isabella had installed artwork by women who had overcome trauma. The cold marble and steel of Richard's aesthetic had been replaced with warm woods and living plants. The office felt like a place of healing rather than exploitation. Mrs. Martinez, her assistant announced over the intercom, the reporter from Time magazine is here for your interview. Isabella smoothed her navy blue dress and checked her reflection in the window. The woman looking back at her was different from the naive architect who had trusted blindly in her husband's love. This woman had eyes that had seen evil and survived it. This woman had a strength forged in the fires of betrayal and loss. The reporter, Maria Santos, was a Pulitzer Prize winner, known for her in-depth profiles of inspiring women. She entered with a warm smile and a recording device. Mrs. Martinez, thank you for agreeing to this interview. The world wants to know, how do you rebuild your life after such a profound betrayal? Isabella gestured for Maria to sit in one of the comfortable chairs by the window. You don't rebuild. Maria, that implies going back to what was before. Instead, you build something entirely new, something stronger, something that can never be destroyed by another person's choices. Tell me about the foundation. Isabella's face lit up with genuine passion. The Isabella Foundation isn't just about providing legal help to victims of domestic violence, though that's crucial. We're working to change the systems that allowed someone like Richard to nearly succeed. She pulled out a tablet, showing Maria the Foundation's latest statistics. We've helped over 2,000 women in 6 months. We've funded legal challenges that resulted in 3 major hospitals changing their policies about medical record privacy. We've established safe houses in 12 cities. And the legislative work was the Isabella Act passed in New York last month, and similar bills are being introduced in 43 other states. It makes it a federal crime to withhold medical information from patients, regardless of family pressure or financial incentives. Maria made notes, clearly impressed. Your ex-husband's assets funded all of this. Richard's money became blood money the moment he used it to try to buy my death, Isabella replied, her voice steady. But that money is now saving lives. In a way, every woman we help is justice for my baby, the son I never got to hold. The reporter's expression softened. How do you cope with that loss? Isabella was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the Manhattan skyline where her new life was taking shape. I cope by making sure his death meant something. Every law we change, every woman we save, every corrupt official we expose, it's all in memory of the little boy who never got to take his first breath. What about your personal life? Are you dating anyone? Isabella smiled for the first time in the interview. Actually, yes. His name is Dr. Michael Rodriguez. He's a pediatric surgeon who volunteers at the Foundation's medical clinic. How did you meet? He was treating a little girl whose father had been poisoning her, similar to what Richard did to me. Michael saved her life, and afterward, we started talking about how to prevent these cases. One conversation led to another. Are you afraid to trust again? Terrified, Isabella admitted. But Michael doesn't ask me to trust blindly. He earns my trust every day through his actions, his transparency, his respect for my independence. He knows that I'll never again be the woman who hands over control of her life to someone else. As if summoned by their conversation, there was a knock on the office door. Michael Rodriguez entered, carrying coffee and wearing scrubs from his morning surgery. He was younger than Richard, with kind eyes and calloused hands that spoke of a life spent helping rather than exploiting. Sorry to interrupt, he said, setting down the coffee. I just wanted to let you know the Peterson girl is awake and asking for you. Isabella's face brightened. She's okay. More than okay. She wants to be a doctor when she grows up. Says she wants to save other kids like you saved her. After Michael left, Maria asked the question Isabella had been dreading. Do you ever regret not seeing the signs earlier? Do you blame yourself? I used to, Isabella said honestly. I used to lie awake wondering how I could have been so blind, so trusting. But my therapist helped me understand something important. The person responsible for Richard's crimes is Richard, not me. What do you mean predators like Richard are skilled at manipulation? They choose victims who have positive qualities, trust, loyalty, love, and they weaponize those qualities against us. My ability to love deeply wasn't a weakness, even though Richard exploited it. It was what made me human. And now I love just as deeply, but I love with my eyes open. I trust, but I verify. I support my partner, but I maintain my independence. Richard tried to teach me that love equals vulnerability. Instead, he taught me that love equals strength when it's coupled with wisdom. Maria flipped through her notes. You've become quite wealthy from the settlement and the business you've built. Some critics say you're profiting from tragedy. Isabella's expression hardened slightly. Every penny I've earned has gone toward helping other women or building the foundation. I live in a modest apartment, drive a used car, and my biggest luxury is buying books for the foundation's libraries. She stood and walked to a wall covered with thank you letters from women the foundation had helped. These critics can question my motives all they want, but they can't question the results. 2,000 women are alive today who might not have been. Hundreds of children are safe. Laws have been changed. That's Richard's money working for good instead of evil. What happened to Victoria Blackwood? She was sentenced to 15 years as an accessory to attempted murder. Her baby was born in prison and is being raised by foster parents. Victoria's father disowned her publicly and withdrew all financial support. She went from oil heiress to federal prisoner in 6 months. Do you feel sorry for her? Isabella considered this carefully. I feel sorry for her child, who will grow up knowing his mother tried to murder an innocent woman for money. I feel sorry for the life she could have lived if she'd made different choices. But do I feel sorry for her personally? No. She knew exactly what Richard was doing, and she encouraged it. As the interview wound down, Maria asked one final question. If you could go back and change things, prevent meeting Richard, avoid the pain you went through, would you? Isabella was quiet for a long time, absently touching the small pendant she wore, a silver baby shoe that represented the son she'd lost. That's the question I ask myself every day, she said finally. And my answer is no, I wouldn't change it. Really, the woman I was before Richard was naive, sheltered, privileged. She designed beautiful buildings but never questioned the systems that made her lifestyle possible. She loved deeply but never fought for anything meaningful. Isabella gestured around the office, at the photos of women they'd helped, at the legal documents that represented laws they'd changed. The woman I am now, she's fought evil and won. She's turned tragedy into triumph. She's saved lives and changed laws. She's found love again, but this time it's a love between equals, not between a predator and prey. My baby's death will always be the worst thing that ever happened to me, but everything I've built from that tragedy, every woman we've saved, every law we've changed, every corrupt official we've exposed, that's his legacy. He may not have lived, but his death is saving other children. Richard thought he could destroy me and profit from my destruction. Instead, he created his own worst nightmare, a woman with unlimited resources, ironclad motivation, and nothing left to fear. As Maria packed up her equipment, Isabella walked to the window overlooking Manhattan. Somewhere in a federal prison, Richard Sterling was discovering what powerlessness felt like. Victoria Blackwood was learning that actions have consequences, and Dr. Chen, cleared of all charges in exchange for her testimony, was back to practicing medicine, this time with a renewed commitment to patient advocacy. But Isabella wasn't thinking about any of them. She was thinking about her future, the foundation that would outlive her, the laws that would protect women for generations, and the little girl in the hospital who wanted to be a doctor. One more question, Maria called out as she reached the door. What's next for Isabella Martinez? Isabella smiled, and for the first time since the interview began, she looked truly happy. Michael asked me to marry him last week, and I said yes, but this time I'm keeping my own name, my own bank accounts, and my own medical records, and our prenup specifies that everything goes to the foundation if anything happens to me. Trust but verify, exactly. Love with eyes wide open. As Maria left, Isabella stood alone in her office, looking out at the city she was helping to change. Richard had tried to write her story as a tragedy, the trusting wife who died for money. Instead, she had written her own story as a triumph, the woman who turned her greatest loss into her greatest victory. Her phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Surgery went perfectly. Home in an hour. Love you. Isabella smiled and typed back, love you too. Can't wait to hear about your day. It was such a simple exchange, but it represented everything Richard had tried to destroy and everything she had fought to rebuild. Trust, communication, mutual respect, love between equals. Her baby would never get to see the world his mother was building. But somewhere in the Foundation's files were thank you letters from hundreds of children who would grow up safer because of his mother's fight for justice. Richard Sterling had thought money could buy him the perfect crime. Instead, his victim had used his own wealth to fund the perfect justice. And Isabella Martinez, survivor, advocate, and phoenix risen from the ashes of betrayal, was just getting started. 5 years later, Isabella Martinez Rodriguez stood at the podium of the United Nations, addressing delegates from around the world about domestic violence and medical rights. The Isabella Foundation had grown into a global organization, and the Isabella Act had been adopted by 17 countries. In the audience sat her husband Michael, holding their 2-year-old daughter Sophia, a healthy, happy child who would grow up knowing that her mother had fought monsters and won. In a federal prison, Richard Sterling had grown old before his time, his appeals exhausted, his empire a memory. Sometimes other inmates would ask him about his famous case. He would tell them he had once been married to the most powerful woman rights advocate in the world. What he never told them was that he had created her. And somewhere in Manhattan, in a small memorial garden behind the foundation's headquarters, a marble stone bore a simple inscription, "Baby Sterling, gone too soon, but never forgotten. Your mother's love changed the world." The story of the millionaire who tried to destroy his pregnant wife had become the legend of the woman who refused to be destroyed, and her fight for justice continued to echo around the world, saving lives that Richard Sterling would never even know about. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's justice. And sometimes, when you think evil has won, a phoenix rises from the ashes and shows the world what true strength looks like. Isabella had learned that love isn't about trusting blindly. Love is about building something so strong that no betrayal can destroy it. And in the end, that's exactly what she did.